Today we will be covering Chapter 2. This chapter will be used as a springboard to understand how the whole ecological system shapes crop performance. We're going to connect the living parts of a field, plants, microbes, insects, and wildlife, along with the non-living parts, light, water, air, and soil, into one operating system. Think of your crops as the most visible piece of a much larger engine that captures energy, cycles nutrients, and defends itself. When we say utilization of cultivating plants, we are also looking about the design choices that let us harvest energy efficiently without degrading the system that produces it. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to point to concrete practices like rotation, cover crops, residue management, and reduce disturbance. These will all mimic nature to reduce purchase inputs. You will see how the ecological lens helps you predict problems earlier and choose management that is both productive and resilient. The terrestrial ecosystem is the community of organisms plus the physical environment of soil and atmosphere functioning together through time. Plants are the primary energy gate, converting sunlight into chemical energy that fuels anything else. Animals, decomposers, and microbes transform that energy and recycle nutrients, creating a feedback loop that stabilizes the system. In natural settings, those loops are tight. What's lost from one place is captured by another. In cropping systems, we interrupt certain loops for harvest, so we must rebuild others through cover crops, residue retention, and diverse rotations to avoid nutrient leakage. Seeing the whole field as a network, not one single crop, is one step to a sustainable yield. Every management choice that increases healthy leaf area and extends the photosynthesis season grows the system's energy budget. That energy becomes biomass, grain, forage, roots, and residues, and then feeds soil biology and higher trophic levels. Stressed canopies, bare soils, or chronic nutrient deficiencies shrink the energy flow and make the system brittle. Practices like timely planting, balanced fertility, and protection from early season stress pay dividends because they amplify photosynthesis. In turn, robust residues support microbial activity and aggression, which improves water capture and nutrient availability, which creates a vicious cycle. In short, more captured light used effectively means more resilient production. Crop ecosystems are simplified and often short-lived, which means many natural relationships do not have time to fully form. Because we remove substantial biomass at harvest, we export nutrients and carbon that natural systems would have recycled in place. To keep yields high, we typically compensate with fertilizer, lime, and crop protection, or useful tools that work best when aligned with biological processes. The more we can rebuild ecological functions like cover cropping to keep living roots or minimizing disturbance to preserve fungal networks, the less we rely on constant external inputs. Our goal is not to recreate a whole wild ecosystem. It is to design a productive one that borrows nature's best tricks effectively and predictably. Ecosystems organize energy flow from primary producers, plants, through consumers, herbivores and predators, and decomposers. Each guild plays a role in stabilizing population, recycling nutrients, and buffering shocks like drought or pest outbreaks. When we suppress entire guilds by eliminating a habitat for the beneficial insects, we accidentally remove natural control mechanisms. Conversely, when we provide floral resources, refuge, and continuous cover, we strengthen the checks and balances that keep pests and diseases from exploding. As agronomists, we must decide which relationship to emphasize so the system does more of the routine work for us. Even though we simplify crops into monocultures, the interactions above and below ground are still surprisingly complex. Roots communicate chemically, fungi trade nutrients for carbon, and microbes respond to residue quality and moisture pulses. Above ground, canopy architecture sets light competition, humidity, and microclimate, which in turn shape disease pressure and natural enemies. Managing this complexity means choosing practices that steer it rather than fight it, like pairing hybrid or variety choices with row spacing and residue crops to achieve faster canopy closure. Complexity isn't the enemy, unmanaged complexity is. Our job is to challenge it towards stability. Competition is simply multiple organisms attempting to use a resource in limited supply: light, water, nutrients, and space. In annual crops, light is frequently the top limiting resource, so early canopy establishment is crucial. Narrower rows, higher population within variety limits, and earlier planting dates can tip competition in the favor of the crop. Surface residue and cover crops also help preemptive weed emergence by lowering light at the surface level and occupying these niches. Designing a system that denies weeds resources is more durable than reacting with chemicals alone. We must do this smartly or the pressure will plummet. In Figure 2.1, you will see the emphasis of how plants of the same or different species respond when a critical resource, often light, is scarce. Taller, faster emerging, or more shade-tolerant individuals gain advantage and suppress their neighbors. In fields, that dynamic defines why uniform emergence is so favorable. A few late seedlings become runts under the canopy. It also explains why early season weed control buys so much yield. It prevents the weeds from capturing light during the crop's most vulnerable stage. By engineering rapid canopy closure and clean early rows, you shift the entire curve towards your crop. In natural communities, most niches, combinations of resource use, timing, and microhabitats are occupied, which limits invaders. In fields, bare soil between rows, fallow periods, and off-season windows create open niches. Weeds excel at finding and exploiting these gaps because they germinate quickly and tolerate stress. We can deliberately fill niches with cover crops, relay crops, and residue so opportunists have fewer opportunities. The result is lower weed pressure, improved soil cover, and better nutrient retention without relying exclusively on an herbicide. Natural systems conserve nutrients by holding them in living biomass and soil organic matter, cycling them repeatedly before losses occur. Surface litter buffers temperature and moisture, protecting microbes that drive decomposition and aggregation. As managers, we can copy those principles with residue retention, perennial or cover crop phrases, and reduced disturbance. The closer our fields are to behaving in this pattern within the constraints of our production, the less fertilizer and irrigation we will waste. Parasites, fungi, bacteria, viruses, nematodes, or even parasitic plants alter host physiology to siphon resources. Diseases often reduce photosynthesis, disrupt water or nutrient flow, and weaken the structure, making plants more vulnerable to stress. What matters for us is the disease triangle: a susceptible host, a vulnerable pathogen, and a favorable environment that must coincide. We can break the triangle with the variety resistance, sanitation, rotation, canopy, and irrigation management that reduces leaf wetness, and targeted protection when risk is high. Thinking prevention first, then precision treatment, that's cheaper and better for the long-term system health. Corrosive fungi live on or within roots and trade water and nutrients for plant sugars. They're especially helpful for phosphorus or under drought stress. Their networks are sensitive to frequent tillage and long periods of bare soil, so practices that keep living roots in the ground help them persist. Decomposers, like earthworms, transform residues into plant-available nutrients and stable soil carbon. Their activity creates pores that improve infiltration and aeration, which makes fertilizer and rainfall more effective. Residue quality matters. Mixes of green, nitrogen-rich material and lightning stalks feed a broader community and smooth nutrient release. Minimizing unnecessary soil disturbances preserves their habitat and the aggregates they build. In practice, you can think of the decomposer web as a slow-release fertilizer factory that you manage with residue and moisture. Figure 2.5 comes from your textbook. Recycling is essential for maintaining the supply of nutrients in natural ecosystems, and soil microorganisms are the primary agent in this process. By decomposing the leaf litter and tree trunk in this picture, they are able to recycle the nutrients in those items. Figure 2.6 comes from your textbook. It looks at the natural ecosystems that operate with inputs of carbon, energy, and water, and are highly conservative of nutrients because of a complex web of ecological relationships. A biome is a collection of ecosystems with similar climate, soil, and plant type. Temperature regimens and seasonal patterns, along with the amount and timing of precipitation and inherent soil characteristics, will define each biome. These broad patterns tell us what kinds of plants will naturally dominate and what kinds of agriculture are plausible without heroic inputs. When your cropping choices align with the biome's strength, say deep prairie soil in a grassland region, you spend less on water and fertility. When you work against the biome, cropping a very arid area without reliable irrigation, you must add more technology and management to compensation. Good agronomy starts by asking what the biome wants to do, then layering management on top of that foundation. Temperature declines with latitude and elevation, and the size of seasonal swings grow as you move away from the equator. At the same time, global air circulation patterns create belts of rising and falling air in each hemisphere. Where air rises, moisture tends to accumulate and precipitation is common. Where air sinks, the air is drier and precipitation is scarce. These circulation belts combine with local geography set the moisture budget that crops ultimately live on. That's why two places with the same average temperature can have very different cropping potential. One may be reliably wet and the other chronically dry. Understanding these will help you with matching your crop, planting window, and irrigation plan to the realities of your site. As latitude increases, the annual average temperatures decrease and day length swings get wider. Both factors influence growth rates and crop selection. As elevation increases, temperatures drop and the growing season shortens, which narrows viable crop lists. The season matters. Regions with a strong wetter dry season are going to require varieties and rotations that will fit with that culture. Soil formations also track climate, so temperature and moisture indirectly steer our nutrient availability and our rooting depths. When we choose a crop, we are really choosing a set of physiological traits that fit into these constraints. The closer the fit, the more consistent the yield will be and the lower of your input bill. Annual amounts and seasonal timing of precipitation are controlled by the same global belts of rising and sinking air. Near the equator, converging air promotes frequent rainfall and less vegetation. Around 30 degrees north and south, descending air produces dry condition and creates the world's desert band. Mid-latitudes often see alternating storm tracks that create grasslands and temperate forests depending on moisture supply. In agriculture, our main levers are capturing what falls with residue, structure, and infiltration, conserving what is stored with mulch and aggregation, and supplying when necessary with efficient irrigation. Water is usually the first or second limiting factor. You must plan around it. As latitude increases further, precipitation typically increases again and temperatures fall, supporting temperate forests and eventually a coniferous forest. Each step along this gradient changed canopy structure, rooting patterns, and soil characteristics. Grasslands often develop deep, organic rich surface horizons. Temperate forests build distinct leaf litter patterns. Taiga soils are cooler, wetter, and nutrient poor. These differences cascade into agriculture. Grasslands and soil are famously productive if protected. Forest soils can be productive with careful management, and taiga soils present significant limitations. Matching the crop and the rotation to the moisture-temperature mix is essential for staple and profit. When in doubt, start with water, then layer fertility and pest management. There are three main belts of surface winds in each hemisphere that are created by the global circulation cells and Earth's rotation. These prevailing winds move moisture and storm systems and shape evaporation rates, which in turn affect where soils stay moist versus where they bake. Vegetation patterns reflect this long-term wind-moisture pattern. In short, wind helps decide which plants can persist where. For agronomy, prevailing winds guide windbreak placement, residue cover strategy, and drift management for sprays. They also affect lodging risk and pollination efficiency for wind pollinating crops. Knowing your dominant wind direction is a low-tech but powerful planning tool. Biomes, climate, and soil set the baseline. How long the growing season is, how reliable water will arrive, how deep and fertile the rooting zone can be. From there, management can stretch or compress potential, and it's rarely rewriting the fundamentals. In a high potential biomass, simple rotations and moderate inputs can deliver a stable yield. In low potential biomes, even excellent management face hard limits. The smartest managers can identify the main constraints: water, heating units, salinity, shallow soils, and they will design a system around every single bottleneck. This approach avoids throwing inputs at the wrong problem, and it also stabilizes yields across a variable year. Tropical rainforests are warm and moist year-round, with the highest biological diversity and the most photosynthetic production on Earth. Clearing forests release a pulse of fertility from surface organic matter, but the bump fades quickly without careful stewardship. Agriculture potential can be high for a few years and then decline rapidly if the soil is not protected and replenished. Sustainable production here demands strategies like perennial systems, careful residue management, legume integration, and erosion control. Our short-term gains without soil care become long-term losses. Deserts are very dry. They have very hot days and a rapid nighttime heat loss. Without irrigation or fertilization, agriculture is potentially very low. When irrigation is used, the salts can accumulate as water evaporates, so leaching and drainage become critical elements of design. Wind erosion and sandblasting will also threaten young crops, making windbreaks and surface cover more valuable. Crop choice is a good emphasis on a drought tolerance, short duration, or a salinity tolerance. Every gallon of water must do two jobs. It must grow the biomass and also protect the soil. Savannas and grasslands usually hold soils rich in organic matter and nutrients, built by deep-rooted grasses over a millennia. Rainfall is often seasonal, with marked dry periods that create a predictable stress window for crops. Agricultural potential is high if topsoil is protected from erosion and nutrient mining is avoided. Strategic irrigation during dry spells can stabilize yields, but even without irrigation, rotations and residue can buffer variability. These systems respond exponentially well to cover crops and residue retentions because the biology is primed to use the carbon. Treat these soils as a non-renewable asset because that's what they are. Temperate deciduous forests are dominated by hardwoods such as maple, hickory, ash, and oak. Photosynthetic productivity is high but confined to the growing season, so management aims to maximize the window. Soils often feature a shallow organic and nutrient-rich surface layer over more weathered subsoil. Agriculture can be highly productive for a few years after clearing, but yields will decline without residue return and erosion control. Balancing fertility and careful traffic management will protect the thin, vulnerable surface horizon. Long-term success means building back what the forest once cycled. Taiga regions are cool and wet with low biological diversity and nutrient-poor soils. Short growing seasons, waterlogged conditions, and cold soils constrain rooting and microbial activity. Large-scale cropping has low potential, but small farms can succeed with cold-tolerant, short-season crops and raised beds or drainage improvement. Nutrient cycling is slow, so organic matter additions and careful timing of fertilizer are important. Perennials and protected culture can expand option in pockets. The theme here is modest ambition, high attention to microbe sites, and relentless soil care. Tundra has ground that is permanently frozen below the surface, permafrost, which is extremely short for a growing season. Warming temperatures are thawing the permafrost in some areas, which creates an unstable ground and releasing CO2 and methane as organic matter decomposes. These shifts can alter hydrology, making wet spots wetter and dry areas more subject to subsidence. From an agricultural standpoint, potential is very low. Protected culture and very short seasons are a rare exception. Soil disturbance can accelerate the damage or the thaw, so minimal impact practices can be essential for any activity. The tundra's best agriculture role is often stewardship, not production. Almost all biomasses have been affected by human activity. Grasslands and temperate forests in particular have been harvested and converted to farmland in many regions. Drainage systems have radically changed the biomes that once contained wetlands. We now recognize that wetlands are crucial to the ecosystem's stability by buffering floods, filtering water, and providing a habitat. As a result, wetland restorations is increasingly common within the agricultural landscape. The lesson for agronomy is that hydrology matters as much as chemistry. Sometimes the best inputs is a functionally water system. Integrating buffers, restoring wetlands, and drainage watermanagement systems will support both our yields and our watershed health. Within any biome, local features create microclimates that differ from a regional average. Hills, valleys, water bodies, trees, and buildings protect spots that are warmer, cooler, windier, calmer, wetter, or drier. These pockets can be used to grow crops that wouldn't succeed in general conditions, or can be used to protect sensitive stages from frost, heat, or wind. Plants remove CO2 from the atmosphere through photosynthesis and return CO2 via respiration. The difference is the net photosynthesis production. Higher NPP systems store more carbon in the biomass and if protected in soils. Agricultural systems can raise NPP by keeping living roots growing longer and maintaining a healthy canopy. However, harvest and tillage can often speed the return of the carbon to the atmosphere. The way to tip the balance is residue retention, reduced disturbance, perennial phases, and cover crops. Think of carbon as both a climate lever and a soil quality lever, a win-win when managed well. After a disturbance like a fire, flood, or tillage, pioneer species will colonize first. Over time, species are replaced as niches develop and resources shift, which trends towards a more stable community. In cropland that is frequently disturbed by communities early, which can mean more opportunities for weeds and less biological complexity. We can partially stabilize between the disturbances with cover crops, perennial borders, or reduced tillage. Doing so moderates swings in pest, moisture, and nutrient availability. Succession is not just ecology trivia, it is a practical guide to making our fields more predictable. Climax community is the last and most stable group of plants from a given climate and soil, and it tends to persist until a new disturbance resets the environment. Agriculture deliberately interrupts this pathway to harvest energy in the form of grain, forage, or fiber. The trick is managing the timing and intensity of the disturbance so we can keep productivity without collapsing biological support. Continuous cover between cash crops is one way to have it go both ways. Disturb the plant and harvest, then quickly rebuild the living cover. Over time, that pattern reduces erosion, which improves infiltration and steadies the nitrogen cycle, or the nutrient cycle. Stability is a management choice, not just a natural outcome. Humans influence almost all of the photosynthetically productive land on Earth through agriculture, forestry, and settlement. This puts a responsibility on us as humans to capture solar energy efficiently, recycle nutrients, and limit our unintended loss. The scale of our footprint means small per acre improvements add up to global claims. Small ineffectiveness will multiply across billions of acres, which will create a large environmental cost. The human footprint accounts for space needed to produce everything we use and to absorb the waste we generate. Production space includes cropland, pastures, forests, and built environments, while waste absorption includes systems that can handle CO2 and other byproducts. Energy is embedded in both production and waste handling, so efficiently directed shrinks the footprint. When we reduce our transportation distances, improve our storage, prevent spillage, we save both land and energy. On farm, that means the right size equipment, effective irrigation, and fewer passes. Off farm, it means that we need to have a smarter supply chain and local processing where it is feasible. One simple way to think about footprint is area used times the intensity of the use. Intensity includes all of the energy and inputs required to make a unit of product. The most energy efficient a process can be, the lower the intensity and therefore the smaller footprint of that output. Precision application, better timing, and varieties that convert inputs into yields that are more efficient all reduce intensity. Likewise, reducing loss between field and consumers lower the effective footprint per edible unit delivered. efficiency is both an environmental and an economic win. Using fossil energy can reduce the land's footprint by making processes more efficient. Think pumps that deliver water precisely or machines that can replace many hours of labor. Burning fossil fuels will raise our atmospheric carbon dioxide, which is the trade-off that we must account for. If the entire world adopted the U.S. farm-to-table agriculture practice at current energy intensifications, agriculture would account for a very large share of the global energy use, about half if one illustrates the estimate. That underscores the need to push efficiency and shift to a lower carbon energy source where possible. On the farm, that looks like efficiency drives, well-maintained engines, and electrification where the grid is clean. Off the farm, it looks like cleaner transportation, better cold chains, and shorter supply lines. Fossil fuel carbon dioxide emissions require absorption by sinks to keep atmospheric concentrations from rising. Forests, especially those at the equator, are outstanding absorbers. Crop systems store carbon temporarily in biomasses and soil, but much crop carbon dioxide is released when the crop is consumed or residues decompose. In the U.S., on-farm agricultural production uses roughly a small share of the national energy, on the order of a few percent, but the broader food system increases the total sustainability. Food-to-table estimates are about a tenth of the total U.S. energy consumption once processing, transportation, residential, and home use is included. That means farm decision and food system logistics both matter for the footprint. Protecting long-living sinks while improving farm and supply chain efficiency is a dual mandate. As forests absorb so much CO2, especially in the tropics, global policies increasingly discuss financial incentives for countries that preserve forest cover. These incentives reflect the climate service forests provide to everyone, not just the nations that host them. From a food system view, protecting forests can mean intensifying agriculture on existing lands rather than expanding into a forested area. That will shift the burden back to efficiency, soil health, and yield stability on working lands. It also places a premium on livestock systems and cropping that make better use of marginal land. In short, climate and food security gain goals reinforce, not oppose, smart land stewardship. Agriculture is energy intensive relative to its share of gross domestic product because we move heavy materials, power large machines, and transform biological systems at scale. On-farm energy use is only part of the picture. The full food system includes processing, packaging, refrigeration, transportation, retail, and cooking. When you add all of those stages, the U.S. food system uses roughly 1 in every 10 units of national energy. That's why improvements on any link, a more efficient dryer, better insulation for cold storage, optimized truck routes, make a measurable difference. For producers, field use audits and precision passes are often the fastest wins. For consumers and retailers, reducing food waste is a sleeper strategy with a huge impact. The biggest takeaway is a two-sided equation. Fossil energy can make agriculture more land and labor efficient, but it increases atmospheric carbon dioxide unless the energy is decarbonized. Therefore, the strategy is efficiency first, clean energy next, biology always. Efficiency lowers the footprint immediately. Cleaner energy lowers the carbon intensity of whatever remains, and biological design, cover crops, perennials, soil health, keep carbon cycling local. On most farms, that translates to fewer passes, smarter irrigation, and relentless protection of the soil structure and cover. In supply chains, it translates to shorter distances, better storage, and the right size packaging. When those pieces lock together, we get more food with fewer unintended consequences.